It's a Saturday afternoon sometime in the 70s. The car windows are down, and a song comes on that everybody in the car knows every word to. Nobody can name another song by whoever's singing it, and nobody really needs to. That one song was enough. It sold in numbers that most careers never touch, and then the artist behind it simply faded from the charts, never to return. So today, we're counting down the best-selling one-hit wonders of 60s and 70s. Number 10, In the Year 2525, by Zager and Evans.
In the year 2525.
Denny Zager and Rick Evans were playing local clubs around Lincoln, Nebraska, with no record deal and no real prospects of one. Evans had written a song years earlier imagining humanity thousands of years into the future, and the two of them recorded it themselves at a small studio in Odessa, Texas, pressing copies on their own label just to sell at their shows. A copy eventually reached RCA, who signed the duo and re-released the single nationally in the spring of 1969. It climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and held that spot for 6 weeks, one of the longest runs at the top of any single that year, and it later spent 3 weeks at number 1 in the UK as well. The song was certified gold, and international sales pushed the total well past 1 million copies. Zager and Evans followed it with an album that barely registered with listeners, and by the early 1970s, the pair had stepped away from music altogether.
In the year 45.
Denny Zager turned to building custom guitars, a business that still carries his name today, while Evans continued riding away from any spotlight. Their single song remains one of the most recognizable pieces of science fiction pop ever recorded, a strange and haunting outlier next to almost everything else that was playing on the radio that summer. What made it stand out even more was the structure of the song itself, moving forward in enormous leaps of time, imagining humanity centuries and then millennia into the future, at a moment when most of the country's attention was already fixed on the actual space race, and the idea of tomorrow felt closer than ever. Evans had reportedly been tinkering with the lyrics on and off for years before the duo ever recorded it, long before there was any studio or label involved, and it's often pointed to as one of the longer, more unusual number 1 hits to ever dominate the airwaves that particular summer.
In the year 2525.
Number 9, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, by Lookingglass.
Sailors say, Brandy, you're a fine girl.
Lookingglass came out of the bar band scene in New Jersey, built around singer and guitarist Elliot Lurie. Lurie had written a song about a girl he knew in high school, and by the time the band recorded it for their debut album, her name had been changed to fit a story about a barmaid in a busy seaport town who serves sailors passing through. Epic Records wasn't planning to push it as a single at all, until a radio promotion manager in Washington, D.C. brought a test pressing to a local station in early 1972, and the phone lines lit up almost immediately. Epic rushed the record into stores, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that August, staying on the charts for 16 weeks and ranking among Billboard's biggest hits of the year. The RIAA certified it gold. Lookingglass managed one more minor chart entry the following year, but nothing close to that first single's reach, and Lurie eventually left the group to work behind the scenes in songwriting and production. Decades on, the song found an unexpected second life when it appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, introducing an entirely new audience to a song that had already been a staple of oldies radio for generations. There's even a small footnote to its cultural reach. The name Brandy noticeably climbed in popularity for newborn girls in the years right after the song came out. The song's setting, a fictional seaport, where sailors come and go, and a barmaid waits for a man already married to the sea, gave it a wistful, almost cinematic quality that set it apart from most of the pop music surrounding it on the radio that summer. Lurie has talked over the years about how strange it felt watching a song written about someone he knew personally turn into something so many strangers felt like they also knew.
She hears them say, Brandy, you're a fine girl.
Number 8, Spirit in the Sky, by Norman Greenbaum.
Going up to the spirit in the sky.
Norman Greenbaum grew up in Massachusetts before settling in California. where he'd already gotten a taste of the music business fronting a psychedelic jug band called Dr. West's Medicine Show and Junk Band. On his own, he wrote a song that blended a heavily distorted guitar with gospel-style imagery, an idea he said came partly from watching country singers perform spiritual numbers on television. He had a friend hand-build a custom fuzz circuit into his guitar, just to get the tone he wanted for the recording. Greenbaum himself wasn't a religious man, but he liked the idea of writing something built around a simple, universal notion of an afterlife, rather than any one particular faith. Released at the tail end of 1969 on Reprise Records, the song climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and reached number 1 in the UK. It sold roughly 2 million copies in its initial run and was certified gold, with later reissues and streaming pushing it into multi-platinum territory. Greenbaum tried to follow it up with a couple of singles, but neither one came close to charting. He eventually stepped back from performing, though the song itself has had a long life on its own, turning up in films and television for decades, including a well-known placement in Apollo 13. Greenbaum has spoken about being remembered as a one-hit wonder with a shrug and a laugh, pointing out that plenty of musicians never get even one song that lasts this long in people's memory. Part of what has kept the record so durable is that guitar tone, a sound so unusual for the time that listeners could pick it out within the first few seconds, long before the vocals even started. It became something of a template for how a gospel idea could be dressed up in a completely secular, almost swampy rock arrangement. And other artists have pointed to it over the years as one of the more original productions to come out of that particular stretch of the late 1960s. Number 7. Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. Wild Cherry started out as a hard rock band from Ohio, led by singer and guitarist Rob Parisi, playing club dates through the early part of the decade. As disco took over the airwaves in the mid-1970s, the band found it harder and harder to get booked, until one night an audience member shouted out a request for something funkier. Parisi took the line and turned it into a song before the band had even finished the set, scribbling the lyrics down on a bar order pad. The track was recorded with a heavy dance groove and was originally meant to be nothing more than a B-side to a planned cover song, until the label heard it and flipped the sides. Released through Epic Records in 1976, it topped both the Billboard Hot 100 and the Hot Soul Singles chart that September, holding the top spot for 3 weeks and eventually earning a platinum certification with sales north of 2 million copies. Wild Cherry never had another hit of that size, and the band broke up before the decade was out. The song got a second wind in 1990, when Vanilla Ice released a cover as the follow-up to his own breakout single, carrying that horn riff to a whole new generation who had no idea where it originally came from. Parisi has said in later interviews that he wrote the entire thing almost as a joke, a way of poking fun at his own band's struggle to adapt to a changing sound, never expecting the line to become one of the most quoted moments in 70s radio. The irony of a hard rock band accidentally writing one of the era's defining disco-funk anthems has followed the song ever since, and it's often cited as one of the clearest examples of an artist stumbling into a hit almost by accident. Number 6. Disco Duck by Rick Dees. Rick Dees was working mornings as a radio disc jockey in Memphis when he put together a novelty record built around a duck-voiced disco parody, an idea loosely inspired by an old 1960s dance record called The Duck. He recorded it quickly with local session musicians, working out the honking vocal effect almost as an afterthought, and it was first put out on a small regional label before RSO Records picked it up nationally. In an odd twist, Dees' own station refused to play the record, worried about a conflict of interest, and he actually lost his job after talking about it on the air. None of that slowed the song down anywhere else. Disco Duck hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October of 1976 and held a spot in the top 10 for 10 straight weeks, even earning a brief cameo in the film Saturday Night Fever. It went platinum, with reported sales past 4 million copies, and picked up a Grammy nomination along the way. Dees went on to build a long career in radio, eventually hosting a nationally syndicated countdown show for years. But as a recording artist, this quacking novelty record was as far as he ever got. It also holds a quiet piece of chart trivia, as it's generally considered the last true novelty song to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The character voice at the center of the record, half duck and half disco frontman, came together almost by accident in the studio, with the engineers experimenting on the fly until they landed on something that sounded ridiculous enough to work. Dees later admitted he had no real expectation the song would travel beyond the Memphis market, and the fact that it became a coast-to-coast phenomenon while his own employer refused to touch it remains one of the stranger footnotes in 70s radio history. Number 5. Sugar. Sugar by the Archies. This one wasn't performed by any touring band at all. The Archies were a cartoon act built around characters from Archie Comics, tied to a Saturday morning television show, with the actual singing handled by session vocalists Ron Dante, Tony Wine, and Andy Kim under producer Don Kirshner, who had done similar work behind the Monkees a few years earlier. An earlier Archies single had barely cracked the charts, giving no real hint of what was coming. Written by Jeff Barry and Andy Kim, Sugar Sugar was released in the late spring of 1969 and reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, holding the position for 4 straight weeks. By year's end, Billboard ranked it as the single biggest song of 1969, ahead of releases from the Beatles and Elvis Presley. It sold around 6 million copies and went gold, making it the first entirely fictional act to top an annual year-end chart. Because there was no real band to promote or tour, there was never any way to build on the momentum. Though, the Archies did land a smaller hit the following year that also went gold. The song was covered not long after by soul singer Wilson Pickett, whose version became a hit of its own on the R&B charts, proof that the melody had staying power well beyond the novelty of a cartoon act singing it. Ron Dante, the session singer behind the lead vocal, went on to have a long career producing and performing behind the scenes for other artists. Though for most listeners at the time, his voice was simply assumed to belong to a drawing on a Saturday morning cartoon, rather than a working New York studio musician. The show and the song were promoted together so heavily that for a while it was genuinely difficult to separate the cartoon from the record climbing the charts underneath it. Number 4. Nana Hey Hey, Kiss Him Goodbye by Steam. This one began as a throwaway. Songwriters Paul Lecca, Gary DiCarlo, and Dale Frashuer needed a B-side to round out a single, so they dusted off an old, unfinished song from years earlier and recorded it quickly in a New York studio. DiCarlo didn't want his name attached to something he considered a joke, especially with a solo deal already in the works, so the track was credited to a made-up band called Steam, a name Lecca said he pulled from actual steam he noticed rising off a manhole cover outside the studio. Radio programmers ended up preferring it over the intended A-side. Released in the fall of 1969, it reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early December, staying there for 2 weeks and becoming the chart's last multi-week #1 of the entire decade. It went on to sell more than 6 million copies and was certified multi-platinum. Since Steam wasn't a real performing group, there was no way to capitalize on the success, and the band never charted again. The simple chanted chorus took on a life of its own over the following decades, becoming a standard sing-along in sports arenas around the world, long after most people had forgotten who recorded it first. The British group Bananarama later released their own version, carrying the song back into the UK Top 10 more than a decade after the original had topped American charts. Because the song began life as filler rather than a serious artistic statement, none of the 3 songwriters ever expected it to outlive them the way it has, turning up at ballparks and arenas on nearly every continent whenever a home team needs a crowd to send an opponent off the field. Gary DiCarlo went on to pursue his solo career under his own name just as planned, though nothing he released under it ever came close to matching the reach of the song he tried to distance himself from. Number 3. In the Summertime by Mungo Jerry.
In the summertime, when the weather is high, you can stretch right up.
Mungo Jerry was a British jug band fronted by singer Ray Dorset, mixing skiffle and blues into a loose, homemade sound built around acoustic guitar, banjo, and washboard. In the Summertime was the group's debut single, written by Dorset and released in early summer 1970. It sold at an astonishing pace right out of the gate, shooting to #1 on the UK charts and staying there for 7 weeks, while also reaching the top 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States. In France, it became one of the fastest and biggest-selling singles the country had ever seen at that point. Worldwide sales estimates vary quite a bit, depending on the source, ranging anywhere from roughly 8 million upward, but by any measure, it remains one of the best-selling singles to come out of 1970. Dorset picked up 2 Ivor Novello Songwriting Awards for the track, one for composition, and one naming it the year's top international hit. Mungo Jerry kept releasing records throughout the decade with a rotating lineup, and Dorset carried the band forward for years afterward. But nothing else the group put out ever reached that same scale. The band's early break came from a memorable festival performance around the same time the song was climbing the charts, sharing a bill with acts like the Grateful Dead. The recording itself was famously loose, built almost entirely around Dorset's own voice, a hand clap rhythm, and a lineup of instruments that felt more like something you'd hear at a backyard gathering than on a polished chart-topping single, which was very likely part of its appeal. Its easygoing, sun-drenched feel made it a natural fit for the season it was named after, and it's remained one of the most licensed songs of the era for exactly that reason, showing up in commercials and films whenever a scene needs an instant shorthand for summer itself.
In the summertime, when the weather is high, you can stretch right up.
Number 2. Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Carl Douglas was a Jamaican-born singer based in London, working steadily without much chart success, when producer Biddu asked him to record something that could capitalize on the martial arts craze sweeping through movie theaters and television at the time. Douglas wrote the song and recorded it in roughly 10 minutes, originally planning it as a B-side to a different track. The label heard something in it and pushed it out as the lead single instead. Released in the late summer of 1974, Kung Fu Fighting topped the UK singles chart and then the Billboard Hot 100 that December, also reaching #1 in several other countries. Estimates put worldwide sales in the range of 10 million copies or more, making it one of the best-selling singles in music history. And it earned gold certifications on both sides of the Atlantic, along with a Grammy nomination. Douglas released a follow-up single that found modest success in the UK but never made a dent in the United States, where he's remembered strictly as a one-hit act. The song has kept surfacing in films, commercials, and cover versions for half a century, including a well-known remix that returned it to the charts in the late 1990s. Douglas himself has said in later interviews that he never took the song especially seriously while recording it, treating it as a quick studio job rather than anything meant to define his career, which made its runaway success all the more surprising to him. The martial arts wave it rode in on faded within a couple of years, but the song managed to outlast the trend that inspired it by a wide margin, becoming a fixture at parties and on radio countdowns long after Bruce Lee films had cycled out of theaters.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Number 1. Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
Terry Jacks had already found some success in Canada as half of the duo The Poppy Family, but it was a solo single that made him a household name on his own. Seasons in the Sun was an English-language adaptation of a French song by Jacques Brel, with early lyrics translated by American poet Rod McEwen. Jacks reworked a good portion of those lyrics himself, writing the song in memory of a close friend who had recently died, and felt the earlier translation was too dark for what he wanted to say. The track was actually intended for the Beach Boys at one point, with a version featuring Carl Wilson on vocals, but the group shelved it before finishing. Jacks decided to record and release it himself, putting it out on his own small label in Canada in 1973, where it quickly became the country's best-selling single up to that point. Bell Records picked it up for wider release, and it reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in March of 1974, holding the top spot for 3 weeks and topping charts in more than 10 countries. Jax also picked up multiple Juno Awards for the song. Worldwide sales estimates run well into the tens of millions, making it the biggest seller on this entire list and still one of the best-selling singles ever released by a Canadian artist. He continued working in music production for years afterward, but as a performer, this remains the song that defined his career, later covered by the Irish group Westlife, whose version reached #1 in the UK on Christmas of 1999. Jax has spoken openly over the years about how personal the song remained to him long after it left the charts, saying the emotion behind it never really faded, even as the record itself became a fixture of easy listening radio for an entire generation. Its gentle, almost conversational farewell has made it a song people return to at funerals and memorials even today. Its original French source material, written decades earlier, never could have anticipated. That wraps up our countdown of the best-selling one-hit wonders from the 60s and 70s. Records that outsold entire careers from artists who never found their way back to the charts. Some of these came from seasoned musicians looking for one more shot. Some came out of studio sessions that were never meant to be anything more than filler, and one came from a cartoon band that didn't exist outside of a Saturday morning television screen. All the same, they became permanent fixtures of the era. Songs that still play the moment they come on the radio. If any of these takes you back, let us know in the comments which one you remember hearing first. And if you enjoyed this look back, give the video a like and subscribe for more nostalgic countdowns like this one.